Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to the People Behind the Power podcast, sponsored by Kentucky Power, AEP. They got several names to go by. I'm joined today by one of their local representatives, Tanner Wolffram. Really nice guy. He's also an attorney, but don't hold it against him. So he does a good job. Um, Tanner, first of all, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you being here. And there's a lot of topics we want to talk about today.
Absolutely.
And I would be remiss if we didn't hit the pink elephant in the room. Now, we're going to hit that, but I want to get to that, and I want to give you a little bit of time. So make sure you're good and salivated, because we got a lot to talk about. A couple things that happened recently. I have noticed you guys did the Power Up the Pantry thing, and some nice donations from generous people around the area, which is interesting in light of all the stuff that we've got going through. And then I've noticed that, in the marketing that you guys are doing, I've noticed actual people that I know in there. And what people don't realize is that, what it takes to run a business like yours is a lot. And when we have a declining population, it's that money, there's still a set amount of revenue that needs to be generated in order to do that. On top of that, you just had a hiring barrage, if you will. I think you hired 20 people or 25 people, or looking to hire 25 people.
I think it was 30 in the Eastern Kentucky footprint from our call center.
And that's an amazing thing. But these are people that, we all go to school with. We all go to, well, some of us go to church. Some people go to, I haven't been to church in a long time. Let us pray. But the people go to church with these folks, and they're neighbors and they're friends and their family, and they're working hard, and they're producing these things. So those are good things. So on that job fair, we had a nice one over at in the Coal Run complex. Where do you know when and where the next one will be? I think there's one coming up soon.
There is one coming up soon. I don't have the exact date off the top of my head. I know that the goal is to ultimately hire an additional 30 call center representatives that can work remotely within Eastern Kentucky. So those folks live here, work here, put a little bit more of a personal touch on customer service. Many of our calls right now run through the call center in Hurricane, West Virginia. So those folks will still report up through that organization, but they will be locally based, working in the community, so that we can keep those folks in the community and help those local customers.
Sure. Well, what's interesting is that I made a call to a call center not too long ago, because I'm laden with problems. I'm just a problem person. As the folks at Appalachian Wireless, I'm a problem to them. And I was talking to this woman who was helping me through my bill or whatever I was doing, and she goes, "Mr. Vanderbeck, this is so-and-so." I'm like, "Oh, how you doing?" And that personal touch really brings through. And when I see the folks out there, the linemen, the line ladies, folks driving the trucks, I had a light out in front of I had a pole out in front, and the guy knows who I am. I mean, I don't know him, but he knows me.
Yep.
I don't know how, but they're very nice and professional. And we talked last time about safety and how your safety regiments are pretty stern and all that. So, you are a business, you are regulated, you have to maintain a certain decorum of money to make sure lines are kept clean, to make sure that when hurricane season comes or the floods or all that stuff, you go out there and you do that on your own nickel, and you have to recoup that money. And this, you have insurance for that, but a lot of times that doesn't cover it. So I wanted to talk about that. The other thing I wanted to talk about, last time we spoke, we talked about coal. Can you kind of give us an update on the usage of coal to generate power?
Sure. So right now we currently have an application pending to extend our interest in our Mitchell plant, which is our coal-fired. We're a 50% owner in a coal-fired unit in Moundsville, West Virginia. That application is still pending before the commission. We get intervener testimony today. So that process is moving along at a pretty rapid clip here. So hoping to provide some information and get a decision on that in the near term, so that we can continue to operate our coal units. Obviously, especially like we saw this summer, right? When the weather's hot, we need all the generation that we can get. The commission, I think, has taken a really keen interest on the generation portfolio of all the Kentucky utilities, not just Kentucky Power, but obviously for us, we've kind of gone through a generation portfolio relook as we've kind of gone the last couple of years. And so For us, we think it's highly valuable to continue to have that plant available to provide service to customers. The coal unit, Mitchell really does provide both kind of a locational hedge to market prices. So we've seen, the market prices in PJM, especially for, capacity, which is like how much generation you actually own in terms of megawatts. That market is really, supply and demand is causing prices to increase fairly rapidly there. So if we had to replace Mitchell, obviously that's a concern or something that we evaluated, and right now that continues to be the least cost reasonable option for us to serve customers, as opposed to trying to replace that megawatts the megawatts that we get from Mitchell to provide service to customers. So we're really looking forward to seeing kind of what our interveners have to say today, and then start working kind of with them to see if there's a path forward to kind of get that case wrapped up.
What we're finding now is that the price of coal to extract it and take it to processing has increased exponentially, and that will affect a utility user's rate as well. Is that a fair statement?
So yeah, we have seen in the last few years, specifically, I think in like the 2022 timeline, where the production of coal became more constrained for us. So when when producers aren't producing as much coal, the supply and demand factors kick in, and then the price of coal like goes up. We've really seen that market kind of level out, and kind of go back to normal levels in the last couple years. And I think we've seen some rhetoric, especially from the federal government, about kind of getting the coal industry kind of kicked back up. So we'll see kind of how that plays out as we go. There's still a little bit of uncertainty around some of the EPA's regulations in terms of how that will ultimately impact existing coal units and coal production. So we're obviously monitoring that, kind of seeing what the current administration wants to do as it relates to EPA regulations that are on the books that would force additional investments, versus maybe we've heard discussions about delaying those regulations that would allow the coal plants to operate as is. So all those things can impact the price ultimately of our coal unit. And so, we're always constantly monitoring that. To the extent that changes are required, then we'll obviously evaluate, whether or not we can continue to operate as coal, whether or not changes need to be made. And so that's always something that's front of mind for us. It's not, I wish it was as easy as, we could just run these things forever, but when we got federal regulations that require us to do certain things or make certain upgrades to the plant based on coal operation, we have to look at it and say, okay, what's the most reasonable, least cost option for our customers? And that's ultimately what factors into any decision we make as it relates to, our generation portfolio, and how much the interest we have in our coal units and our gas units. So
sure. When the Obama administration it hasn't been at Obama, it happened way long ago. But when when you guys took your scrubbers out and converted to natural gas, it cost billions of dollars. Is that fair to say, to do that? And if the Trump administration says, listen, I'm relaxing all the EPA environmental rules, you guys mine all the coal you want, generate the energy with all the coal that you can get your hands on, what would AEP's position be? I mean, it's not like you can just take those gas plants and convert them to coal without costing a ton of money, right?
yeah, so I don't think when you're looking at the Big Sandy plant specifically, which is our gas unit that's in Louisa,
Right.
The optionality there to convert back from gas to coal is not, it's not really in the cards. What we are doing, and as part of our rate case, we are proposing to build a new generating facility at the Big Sandy site. It'll be a 450 megawatt natural gas CT that will, obviously offset some of our capacity and energy needs that we see in the coming years. So we are making investments there from a generation portfolio to build a new facility at that location. So we're obviously very excited about that. If we go back to your point, when we converted Big Sandy from a coal unit to a gas unit, that was largely driven by cost, right? So at the time, we would have had to invest, roughly $1 billion to upgrade the Big Sandy plant to allow it to continue to operate as a coal unit, versus, acquiring Mitchell at the time that we did, which would save customers, roughly $500-ish million as compared to the alternatives, because Mitchell was a little bit newer, had some of the upgrades kind of installed already, so we didn't have to make some of those additional investments. So What we're looking at now is kind of like a future investment, specifically with coal at Mitchell, right? So currently on the books, there's a couple environmental regulations that would require additional upgrades at Mitchell. So there's, technical terms, but there's some
Sure.
coal residual rules in place that may require additional upgrades if the current administration decides to relax those rules, and that's investment that we don't have to make, right? And thereby the unit gets cheaper. I think the other thing that we're looking at, and we're really, we've fought for this at the legislature the last session. We're going to continue to fight for it. Is additional securitization legislation specific to Mitchell. And so what that will allow us to do is bring down the cost to customers of those Mitchell units. So when Mitchell becomes cheaper, so let's say customers are paying less for Mitchell than customers currently are.
Sure.
Then when you're looking at replacement options, that Mitchell unit looks a lot more attractive to keep and maintain versus, replacing it with a new generating facility. So we're trying to find ways to immediately impact customers' bills by keeping the cost of Mitchell as low as we can, so that we can keep that unit in the system instead of having to go to market and replace it. And
Sure.
like I said, those market prices right now are very, very high.
And they fluctuate daily. I can't help but think that when the plant up at Big Sandy got shut down, I can't help but think that the gas people were behind that, because they said, "Oh, gas is cheap, and you guys spend all that money to do that," and then all of a sudden they raise the price of gas and kind of screw the customer out of that thing, because that's just that. I'm just a conspiracy theorist too, so that's just my point of thinking.
Yeah, I will say on that, when you look at a gas unit versus a coal unit, right? There are a lot of things that factor into it. So when you have a coal unit, you obviously have a lot more equipment to run that unit, right? You have to have a conveyor belt for the coal. You have to have additional personnel on site because there's a lot more equipment, especially with the environmental regulations. We had to make a lot of equipment upgrades at the Mitchell facility or any coal facility to allow that plant to operate under then existing EPA regulations. Whereas like the natural gas plant, they're a little more efficient. You don't have some of that same equipment that you would for a coal facility.
They burn cleaner too, don't they?
They burn cleaner. They usually operate a little more frequently because again, the price of natural gas versus the price of coal continues to be, the price of natural gas continues to track under or cheaper than the price of coal, even from like an acquisition. Sure. So those units do tend to be cheaper for customers in terms of their overall cost of operation. So that's always a factor when we look at this, and that's again why we're so committed to securitization, because we can kind of close that delta in terms of the cost of operating Mitchell versus the cost of operating a new natural gas unit. Right, when Mitchell becomes cheaper for customers, it's harder to replace, and so that's obviously something we're looking at.
One of the things that I've heard from some coal operators, and I don't know if you even know this, it's a kind of technical, but I was told that it takes more natural gas to create the same amount of BTUs that it would be for coal. So in other words, a ton of coal can create X amount of BTUs, and it would take X amount more of natural gas. So even though natural gas per unit is cheaper on paper, it takes more of those units to create the same amount of BTUs or watts that a lump of coal would do. Is there any truth to that, or is that?
I don't think I could give you that answer specifically. It's something I would be happy to look at and get back to you on.
Yeah.
I don't have that off the top of my head. Unfortunately, I'm not like you said, I'm a recovering lawyer. I'm not a natural gas or gas plant engineer at this point. I moonlight when I can, but
There you go. Well, we'll have to, since you're recovering, we'll have to get the tap set up for you, and we can help you out. Let's get on to this to the rate increase and see what's happening. I just read this morning that Duke Energy was awarded, or the PSC went in their favor to get it like a 10.41% increase, and that's going to increase rates to the average customer who uses 1,000 kilowatts per month to about $12 or $15. It seems like the utility companies are doing that, but before I do that, I want to talk to you about this. I had my crack research department go through, scour all your social media stuff and some stuff on the internet and find out what people are saying. And I'm going to address that. But what's important that people know is that Kentucky Power AEP and Tanner is not ducking. They're not going to duck the questions. No, the transparency is I may not like what I'm about to hear from you, but I appreciate your honesty and what you're going to tell me about this stuff, because nobody wants to see rate increases. But the reality is just when our school boards and our library boards, they have got a certain level that they have to maintain. And if they don't maintain that level because of several things, houses not selling fast enough, or because there's not enough people putting money into that money, they have to raise taxes. So if there's less people, they have to raise taxes. Nobody likes that. What's happening and correct me if I'm wrong, is that because the lack of jobs are here and people are moving out, and we don't have the coal boom like we had many years ago, and there's not a lot of jobs being creative, and there's not a lot of people and businesses and companies and individuals paying that finite number of money that it takes to generate that power for us to turn the lights on, it's going to cost us more. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, so I think of it, I've had this conversation a little bit with some other stakeholders as well. It's kind of like you look at uh, kind of like a pie analogy, right? If all of a sudden, so let's say we build rates based on a certain size of pie, right? And then somebody comes in and takes a slice out of that pie. That's not, like someone goes away. Now all of a sudden we have to redistribute that smaller pie over that same customer base, or the remaining customer base. So it's the same thing. So if we have a room full of, 100 people, and we design rates to collect the amount of money we need to operate over that 100 people, and then 10 people leave, even if we keep the cost exactly the same, now we have to redistribute the cost that those 10 people were paying over the remaining 90. And so that's part of the problem, or part of the thing that we're dealing with a little bit is we've had, over the last, 5 to 10 years, we've seen significant load loss. And really in our industrial class is where we see it, right? So coal mining load has obviously been a big area for us in terms of loss of load. You also have to remember the way we built our system initially, our distribution system. So our distribution system was functionally built so that it could serve coal mining load kind of off those radio feeds, right? And so when that coal mining load goes away, now all of a sudden residential customers are the only people that are being served by those facilities. So you're kind of reallocating costs that was being paid by those coal mining customers to residential customers. And so the system's a little bit bigger,
Sure.
right? Because it had to serve coal mining load. So now we have to reinvest to resize that equipment so that it's reflective of only serving residential load. So that's part of it. And I will tell you, I think from our perspective, I see what we do from an economic development position every day. Our economic development manager's office is right down the hall from me. I know she is constantly working. The number one thing that we can do to help customers is get load in Eastern Kentucky, and we are committed to it, and we work on it every day. We really, 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 really need, all the help we can get, all hands on deck. We need business in Eastern Kentucky. We need jobs in Eastern Kentucky so that we can grow and, reduce, some of the unemployment statistics we see. The more jobs we can get in here, the more we can get people good paying jobs, the better we can positively impact rates, right? It's the same concept the other way, right? If we set rates based on 100 people, but we add 120 people, now we take those same costs and spread them over the 120 instead of the 100. So that drives bills down for everyone. And so that's the number one thing that we are committed to try to, grow Eastern Kentucky, bring jobs back to Eastern Kentucky, specifically, manufacturing jobs, large industrial manufacturing would be great. And that's the number one thing that we can do to help rates.
So, you hit on a couple of points that I want to touch on because, again, the people are out there saying that. Now, you got these folks that are on fixed incomes and they're saying, my bill's going up. I can't afford. So on that same pie chart that we just talked about,
Mm-hmm.
if 100 people are there and the rates are billed upon those 100 people and 10 people leave, why wouldn't Kentucky Power or AEP take that chart or that slice of that pie where the profit is and make that profit smaller so that the rates don't have to be increased? And you guys spend a lot of money on economic development. and you just answered it, but I want a little bit more of a definitive. Let's see if we can kind of get into it.
Sure.
But if we take that slice of the pie that you have for economic development and it completely cut that out, wouldn't those 90 people left not have a rate increase? So essentially, the ratepayers are paying for the profit and the economic development and all that stuff. So going back to the pie, how do you, with record profits that you guys have had, and we have these folks on fixed incomes, the government is shut down. We don't know if Social Security is going to be giving money out to the old folks, like people like me. And now we're looking at a rate increase to the public service. Why doesn't AEP take that pie and say, okay, we're going to cut our profits instead of X, we're going to cut it down X minus, and we're going to cut out our economic development money that we get from ratepayers and give it back to the ratepayers so we can lower the bills? Why wouldn't they look at that?
Yeah, so I'll take the kind of the earnings piece first. So it's important, I think, for folks to understand that Kentucky Power, while it is an AEP company, we are not AEP generally, right? So AEP is a large conglomerate of multiple operating companies and unregulated business. And so when you talk about AEP from a record earnings perspective, Kentucky Power, like when we just make a decision to file a rate case, the rate case isn't based on, we have to file a rate case to increase AEP's earnings. We are looking at it in isolation from looking at like the Kentucky Power footprint and what the operating company Kentucky Power, where we're at from an earnings perspective, and making that decision solely based on how we're operating. And so the reason we do that is because ultimately it is the operating company, so Kentucky Power's responsibility to provide safe and reliable service to our customers. And so when we look at this from a Kentucky Power perspective, right now we are earning somewhere in the neighborhood of 4%. Our authorized return from the commission is 9.75%. So there is a significant gap in terms of what we're actually earning versus what we're allowed to earn.
And is that set through the PSC, that 9 point something?
9.75.
So would it be fair to assume that while AEP is the master or the head of the monster, and here's little old Kentucky Power, AEP may be having record earnings, but
that's correct.
Power is not.
That's correct.
So if you run a business and you have several companies, let's say you have 20 Dunkin' Donuts stores, and one is not doing very well, and you have to do something to fix that, to make it happen. But all the other ones, the head company may be doing well, but out of those 10 Dunkin' Donuts stores, 2 or 3 of them aren't profitable. So you have to do something to that. You have to shut them down, which obviously you can't do, or you have to figure out how to provide reliable and safe power and energy to the public in which you serve.
Yep.
And one day when we get profitable, because just like you said, when we have more business coming in because you're investing in business, when we have more business coming in, would there be a potential? Now, no, let's go back. Let's go back. You guys are looking through the PSC at a 14.9% rate decrease. Okay. How did you come up with that? Where did you guys just sitting around drinking bourbon and say, "Oh, it's a 14.9"? How did you come up with that? And what's the genesis behind that? And what do you anticipate that increase covering?
Sure. So I think the important thing to remember here, from when we file these cases in front of the Public Service Commission, we are ultimately a cost-based company, right? So we file what's called a historic test year, which means we look back at a 12-month period and say, what did we actually spend in that 12 months to provide service to customers? And so based on what we spent, we'll look at things that maybe like one-offs and, adjust for that to say, okay, well, that's not representative of what we think we're going to experience going forward. But generally speaking, our rates are based on what we actually spent in that 12 months to provide the service to our customers.
And when you do that data, that historical data, do you take items out like the massive flood we had in February 14th?
Sure. So they're exactly. So the way that we
because you really can't count that as an expense, because that's a variable expense. It's not a fixed expense. A fixed expense is, how much it costs for, you to drive down here and talk to dummies like me, and those fixed expense, your insurance, your this, your generation, your payroll and all that stuff. But when we have a variable expense like a massive flood, are those items taken out of the line item, if you will, of the budget, so you can reorganize that?
Yeah, so it depends on the expense. So if there's something like that that's like not representative of what because remember, we're setting rates on a prospective basis, meaning that our rates that we propose, even though they're based on a historic 12 months, those rates wouldn't go into effect until March of 2026. So like we'll look out and say, hey, if this expense isn't representative of what we think we're going to experience in 2026, then we'll adjust it. So like storms is an example. Although we did something a little unique with storms in this rate case, and we can talk about that if we want to. But traditionally speaking, the way storms have operated is we say, okay, let's look at our last 3 years or 5 years and get an average of what our storm expense was to put that into base rates. Now, in this case, we've proposed to set storm expense to 0. So basically, we've removed all storm expense that we incurred during the test year, even some of what are called regulatory assets. So sometimes we'll go to the commission and say, hey, we had this expense. We're currently not collecting it. Allow us to put it on our books as a regulatory asset, and then we'll collect it in the future. We're not proposing to do that in this case at all. But there are items like that where, we'll look at things and say, hey, we had this one-off during the test year that we don't think is representative of what our costs are going to be moving forward. So we'll adjust that down. So there are items like that throughout the test year that we make adjustments for. And ultimately, what I will say is when we calculate the overall revenue requirement, so that 14.6% increase that folks see, we were challenged by leadership, and I challenged my team to find ways or things that we should be probably recovering, but things that we could either defer to a later time to keep immediate rate impacts down, or things that we could tweak a little bit in terms of what we're collecting and the timing of collection, so that we can keep that rate increase down as much as we could. So I think we're a little unique in that we really try to find ways to mitigate that initial ask, because we understand our customer base. We understand the macro and microeconomics in Eastern Kentucky, and we understand the affordability concerns. So we are proactively trying to find ways to recover costs differently so that customers aren't getting that immediate rate impact. When you look at it from pure numbers, right? Like that's when we file rate cases, it is, that old saying, people lie, numbers don't. We look at the numbers and we get a revenue requirement. And when you got the initial revenue requirement, we said, hey, we're not comfortable filing at that level. What can we do to get the ask down? And so we went through a very rigorous process to try to figure out, okay, what are things that we can, what can we live without moving forward? So even though you're seeing a 14.6% rate increase, there are things in there that we are taking, the financial pain on as well, things that we are either kicking to recovery to a later date or things that we aren't asking for recovery of. One of those examples is Mitchell. So typically, right, we would update depreciation rates because, when you have a big capital asset, you're basically reducing its value until the end of its useful life. So we ran a depreciation study, and one of the things we needed to update was the depreciation rates for Mitchell to allow us to collect the dollars associated with Mitchell by the end of 2040 to fully depreciate it. And so we looked at that, and because of our efforts in securitization, we just said, hey, we're not going to update depreciation rates for Mitchell at this point. So we save customers $11 million a year by like roughly $11 million by saying, hey, we're just going to deal with that at a later date. If we get securitization, we can handle it through there. So we have really tried, and I've really challenged my team, and company president Wiseman has challenged us to find ways.
She loves me, by the way.
She's great.
Love her hernia surgery.
Yeah, she definitely.
I'm only kidding about that. I have a lot of respect for her.
No, she's great, and she really does. She pushes us to find ways to keep our rate impacts as low as we can. Now, ultimately, like you referenced, the commission's going to look at the interveners in the case. So right now, the Attorney General's office, KIUC, which is the Kentucky Industrial Users, CAICIA, which is and the Joint Interveners. So there's four multitude of parties. Oh, and SWVA. I don't want to forget them. I don't want to get yelled at. So they're in the case right now. They'll ask us questions. They'll audit everything that we have presented, and then the commission will ultimately make determinations on what they think what is reasonable in terms of an overall increase. So I think there's some popular theory out there that we come into these cases and we say, oh, hey, we know we're not going to get everything we asked for, so let's inflate the ask.
That was my next. See, when I worked in radio very many years ago, I worked for a company. We were trying to go to the feds to get a tower put up. We needed 100,000. We needed 50,000 watts. We applied for a 100,000 watt thing, knowing that the feds are going to say, we're only going to give you 50. So we got what we want. Are you needing 14.9% or are you needing 7%? I mean, if the PSC comes back and says, they're going to give you 7%, how would that affect you guys going forward?
It would have a material impact. So from our perspective, in order to get to a level of authorized ROE that we're proposing, that 14.6% is required. So again, like we talked about, we are a cost-based business. So there is nothing in there, like in our case, that's what I would call fluff, right? In terms of we could increase this number a little bit to maybe, so then the commission could walk us down.
Sure.
From our perspective, what we filed is what we actually need to operate. And ultimately, it is the commission's decision that, typically speaking, they will make adjustments to whatever we file and in their ultimate order. But from our perspective, we are not loading the rate case at a level that says, okay, well, we asked for 15%, but we know we're going to get 8% and we can live with that, right? Like if we filed 14.6, if the commission issues 7, there will be challenges for us in terms of, we will have to rethink some of the work that we're doing, or we will have to delay investments.
I was going to say, would service be compromised if you don't get what you're looking for?
So obviously we have an obligation to provide safe and reliable service to our customers. So we will always do that. But there may be things that we have to change in terms of our normal operation, right? So one of the things that we're doing in the case is asking for additional money to cut trees outside of our right-of-way. So that's our number one cause of outage on the distribution system, right? So when we have lines, we maintain a right-of-way around those poles and those lines, but we can't really do anything about the trees that are up on the mountain that fall off the mountain and fall into our lines, right? But part of our program and part of our ask is to allow us to do some of that work to eliminate some of those trees that we're worried about falling into the line so that we can increase reliability. There are other programs, right? So if the commission says, okay, we're only going to give you 7%, there may be some of those items that we have to look at and either do less of, or, modify the way, we operate to operate within that budget. Or, at that point, we may have to look at filing another rate case at that point, because then at that point we're already under earning. So,
you could be where you're going to your insurance carriers and say, listen, our insurance rates are too high. We need to look at that, or healthcare rates are for your employees and stuff like that. There's this thing, this back thing in the back of my mind. I keep seeing these folks on fixed incomes whose energy bills just keep skyrocketing. And they have to choose between medicine. They can't afford to pay their mortgage. They can't afford to do this. Some say that their mortgage is lower than their power bill. They have to choose between that. What programs are out there to the consumer that AEP has or Kentucky Power has to help the ratepayer, so that we're not sitting here watching old people or anybody freeze to death?
Right. So obviously we are very aware of those circumstances, and we work with our customers. When a customer calls in and they say, hey, I can't pay my bill this month, right? We have different payment arrangements that we can work out to, spread that bill across, multiple months. We also have a variety of lists on our website about, assistance programs that customers can sign up for. We have Heart and Thaw, which is our low income program that customers can sign up for as well. And that's all available on our website. I think the other thing I wanted to throw out there, and I guess it's a little bit of a marketing thing for us, but we also just got approval in February of new demand side management programs. And so what we typically see, like the number one problem I see with customers in our service territory, when we get the, hey, my bill's $3,000 or my bill's $4,000, whatever, we see some of those. And what we do is we look at it, and you'll see customers with usage that is extremely high. So we have customers on the system that use 3,000 kilowatt, 4,000 kilowatts a month, which is a lot. And so what our demand side management programs allow us to do is to provide incentives to those customers to help them lower usage. And so if you can lower your usage, then you can lower your bill.
How does somebody get involved with that part? What do they do? Just call the 800 number and say, listen, I need help with my bill.
Yeah, so our demand side management programs are available on our website. I also think you can call in to, inquire about our demand side management programs. And, we obviously want customers to take advantage of it, so that they can make positive impact on usage. And I'll say the other thing that we're doing within the rate case that we're really excited about and hope that the commission and the parties feel the same way that we do. We've designed a new residential rate structure that should protect some of our high energy user customers, especially in the winter, right? That's where we see it the most, like electric heating customers. They may be living in non-energy efficient homes, and so their usage is very high because they're heating with electricity and they're not energy efficient. So in some instances, right, you're heating the outside. And so what we've done is created a new residential rate design that it's complicated, and I'll sound regulatory nerdy, but basically there's two different rates for different levels of usage and two different customer charges. So what that does is it allows us to say, okay, once a customer crosses 600 kWh of usage in a month, they will flip to a lower rate, so that what happens is those customers that are on the high end, their bill impacts are reduced as compared to what they would be under a traditional rate structure. And so we're trying to find creative ways to help these customers that have high energy usage or high bills in the winter. We're doing everything that we can. And, I think with a combination of our DSM programs, and hopefully we can continue to expand on those DSM programs if they're successful. And then our new residential rate proposal, we hope we can make positive change, especially on those high energy users.
And these 30 folks that you're looking to hire will be trained to help people understand that and put those people in there.
Exactly.
Well, first of all, I can't tell you how much I really appreciate your transparency. I don't like what you're saying. I mean, but, hell, when I go to the doctor and he says, Jeff, we've got to do a proctology exam for you. I don't like that, but it's got to get done. I don't like it, but I appreciate your honesty. We hit a bunch of the social media stuff that we talked about. You can't control that. You could just control what we say. We talked about the transparency. Transparency was, I think the people and your customers, as much as we don't like it, should be appreciative of the fact that, you are trying very different ways. It's not like you guys say, well, let's just make more money, so I need a new boat. We're trying to, you guys are trying to figure out how to constantly keep costs down. And those people that are paying that little sliver in that pie, their job is to figure out how to keep costs down. So we got to keep those people employed. The other part about the economic development we talked about, I hate this. I don't like the fact that Kentucky Power does that, but I'm appreciative of the fact that they do that, because I have seen so much impact in my business running newspapers of the effects that your economic development packages have. If you didn't have an economic development plan, we would have less people here, less industry here, and less industry means more rates for everybody else. And
exactly,
you'd be going for a 50% increase instead of a 14.9% increase. And I get it. You got management programs to help people negotiate through their bills. AEP is not going to let anybody starve. It is what it is. We have to provide safe, reliable power. And we talked about, coal and the potential use of more coal in the future. Maybe that could bring back some more jobs in the future. All the good things that you guys are doing to power up the pantry and all that stuff. I really, the people behind the power mean a lot to what's happening at Kentucky Power and AEP. Our neighbors, our friends, our family members, are all employed there, and those employees are building that tax base and helping that tax base so that we can keep our tax rates low and all that stuff. And let's hope that we get more people working and more industry in here. And thanks to your all's efforts, we could probably kind of do that to get more industry here. and help keep our rates low. Now, I held your feet to the fire about the 14.9% increase. And when you come back and we get more industry, and I'm going to hold your feet to the fire and say, listen, we need a decrease.
Sure.
And when we get to that point, I want to be able, we need to talk. So as long as we know that potential decrease is on the table as the population rises and more industry happens, I think that pill would be a little bit easier to swallow.
Yeah, I would absolutely love to be on a podcast with you explaining a rate decrease versus a rate increase. And we are doing everything in our power to bring that change to Eastern Kentucky. I know, like you said, nobody likes hearing about rate increases. We are acutely aware of where we're at in Eastern Kentucky. Our employees live here, right? Like our employees pay
They got to pay those. You guys pay the power bills, and so does everybody else in your company. They got to pay the power. They don't like that if they have to take more out of their budget, their pie. But it is what I mean. We don't have much for choice, and it's not like there's people say that you have a monopoly, but you know what? I challenge another. There was a potential sale a few years ago, and the company came in and looked at it and said, listen, we're not doing this. It would cost us to wait. If you think your rates are high now, wait till you see what we have to do in order to do this, because we can't do what Kentucky Power's doing, and that's why that sale fell through. So what you guys are doing is behind the scenes is vitally important to the future of not only this region, but it's also important to the people by supplying affordable, reliable, safe energy to our folks. Tanner, once again, I really appreciate your time.
No, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, and I can't wait to have you again when we have the rate decreased podcast, because we will have beer. We'll have a beer. We'll do a cheers, and
that sounds awesome.
And we'll have people here again on behalf of Kentucky Power, the people behind the Power podcast, once again sponsored by Kentucky Power AEP. Really appreciate it. I'm your host, Jeff Vanderbeck. Have a great day. Keep the lights on. Thanks, Tanner. I appreciate your time. Safe driving.
Thank you so much.